Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me on today's town hall. We have got a very special guest today. I'm very honored to have the Pennsylvania Auditor General here with us, Eugene DePasquale. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
So thanks, Patty, and thanks for allowing me on, and also happy Monday to everybody.
Yes, we survived another weekend of quarantine.
That's right.
Well, for those of you who don't know, he has been the Auditor General since 2013. And prior to that, he was a state representative for the 95th District for 3 terms. So you have spent quite a long time serving the residents of Pennsylvania.
It has been an honor to do both, and certainly, and I jokingly say, other than playing in the major leagues, I can't imagine something I would have enjoyed much more over the last 7 years than being state auditor general. I've enjoyed every second of it, and certainly we have enormous challenges now as a state and a nation, and just looking to do my part to try to help South Central Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania as a whole, and do my part also to look out for myself, my family, and try to help our fellow neighbors as we try to get through this.
Yeah, and you've done a great job. I mean, you are definitely being the state's top watchdog, you definitely take that seriously and have shown a light on a lot of things that need to be changed in the state. And I appreciate that tremendously. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Patty. It was, when I took over in 2013, Governor Corbett was the governor. He was a Republican governor. Now you have Governor Wolf, a Democrat. And I just, through the last 7 years, just calling him like I see him, whether there was waste in a Democratic or Republican administration, something was operating right or wrong, you just got to call it like you see it to try to make the state work better for all the residents.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, can you just give a brief description of what your office does as Auditor General?
Yeah, the Auditor General is the chief fiscal watchdog for the state of Pennsylvania. So my job is to make sure taxpayer dollars are spent legally and effectively. And by that, it means not just that the dollars and cents add up, but are we getting value for those dollars? So, for example, part of that is try to crack down on waste. We found over $1 billion wasted by Harrisburg, money that was, that could be put back into other programs to improve the lives of the people of the state. But it's also about effectiveness of that spending. For example, we found over 3,200 untested rape kits.
Yes.
58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. Even, when it comes to auditing school districts, we found some of the most corrupt school bus contracts in the Scranton School District. We unearthed some of that, turned it over to the Attorney General, and some of those people are now going to prison. So it's about cracking down on waste, but also making sure these programs work better. Some of them relate to healthcare. We audited some of the in-home care service providers, found they weren't even paying their workers, which directly impacted not only the workers, but the people that most needed that type of care. We've audited the pharmacy benefit managers, found out some of the waste and what's helping drive skyrocketing prescription drug prices. And we also have found ways to try to put more money back into our roads and bridges. So that's some of the work that I've done over the last 7 years. Certainly during this pandemic, the challenges have changed. And, when I first took over in 2013, the department was facing a deficit. So we had to make a lot of changes. I got rid of the car fleet. We shifted to an all-paper department. But one of the big changes that now makes us, and I want to say this, I had no idea this was coming, so don't take this as me having some crystal ball.
Right.
But one of the things that we did was we shifted to a work-from-home policy for all of our rank and file auditors in my first year as Auditor General. So that has made us actually right now, we're still, when the Capitol in a sense got vacated, we were still able to operate in the exact same manner as we were because we were already working from home from 2013 on.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you is if your office is still running. And so how do you do a long distance audit if you're working from home and you can't go face to face? How do you continue to look into things from a distance?
So that's a great question because we're working from home, but still a lot of what we do requires at least some type of meeting. So here's an example. The organizations that we're auditing, that have electronic capabilities, that they have Zoom, FaceTime. It's still relatively seamless. Again, it's not
Right.
perfect. You'd rather be in person, but we can do stuff like this as an on entrance interview.
Sure.
They can scan us documents back and forth, and we can still continue to do that type of work. The challenge comes in is that some of our volunteer fire departments that we audit,
Right.
they now have, obviously, for a whole host of safety reasons, they're only coming in when they're going out on call. We totally understand that.
Yeah.
So, and they don't have electronic documents. So we've, in a sense, had to put those audits off to the side for some of the entities that we audit that aren't electronic, or maybe just have other priorities. Because when this first started, I had a basically conference call with my whole department, and I said, look, we're going to all, number one, make sure you're safe, make sure your family's safe.
Yeah.
We're still going to do our job, but we have to also remember we're all human beings here. And so, for example, I'm not going to compromise someone's safety just to make sure we get an audit done a week faster.
Right.
Look, it's important that we look out for these taxpayer dollars, but I'm not going to ask a volunteer firefighter to compromise their safety to get that audit done just a week faster. So we're trying to balance all of those issues as we continue to do our job.
Yeah, and it's very tricky for everybody, trying to figure this out. Like I've said this before, nobody, like you said, nobody saw this coming. And sadly, some of our departments have been cut that we really need funded right now, like the unemployment. And those poor people in that office are doing the best they can and trying to keep up, but everything's just overloaded and swamped, and things are definitely different.
We did an audit, and it came out in 2017, and people can look it up on our department website, which is paauditor.gov, where we saw that unemployment system is basically in 2017 was being held together with duct tape, and that wasn't a Democratic or Republican problem. That was being built up over a period of decades.
Right.
Our audit exposed that. And for whatever reason, the legislature didn't want to invest to fix the system. Now it is being overwhelmed, and the staff that are there, I'm sure they're doing the best they can. The governor's even talking about trying to hire, I think, 100 additional people just to process the claims because the computer system cannot keep up with it. And our audit, basically said, hey, if we have another recession, let alone a depression, this system, which is a COBOL system, and what I found out in other auditors is that was not rare. Like other states were basically had the same, basically dinosaur type system as well. They're all getting overwhelmed right now. That's the concerning part to me is, hey, the system isn't working right. Okay, that's the governmental part of it. The human part of this is are people going to get their checks in time to be able to pay the rent for their mortgage because they need that money?
Absolutely. And it's easy, when you're in a crisis like we are now to have, 2020 hindsight. Like this shines a glaring light on what's not working. But when you have people like yourself in your office pointing these things out years ago, and the legislature and the governor's office and everybody else just turns a blind eye to it. And then we get here and we find out that, we really needed this system to be up and running in terms of a crisis, and they didn't do it. And that just kind of shows how important the work you do is and how important it is that people listen to it, and act on it.
I know sometimes people and the legislature sometimes, well, hopefully when you get there, this won't be one of your criticisms of the next audit. But they say, why do you have so many press conferences? Well, this is why. It's to highlight these issues so that we can try to drive change. So to be clear, some of these areas we've gotten dramatic change right away. Some of them have taken a while. Like when we found the untested rape kits, that obviously was a very crystal clear issue. And the legislature, the governor, immediately, I'm not saying immediately like the next day, but there was a calling card to get something done on that. Prosecutors across the state, so there was a coming together. The unemployment one, to be blunt, we pushed hard, but the legislature never funded the fixes that were needed because I think there was this feeling, well, the economy is doing fine. We don't need to do this. And as we now know, and again, nobody saw this coming, but it is why sometimes I can be a pain in the rump when I'm the Auditor General pointing out these issues,
Yeah.
because you never know what's coming. And if that system, and I said it then, and people can look it up, but this system doesn't get fixed when we head into a next recession, it's going to get overwhelmed. And clearly now that's what's happening. So that's why the state auditor general, whether it's myself, my predecessors, and certainly the one that comes after me, they hold these press conferences because it's important to get information out to the public.
It is, and I've been a government watchdog for a long time, and I found that, you know, the best sanitizer, they say, is sunshine.
Right.
And you know, if you don't shine a light on the things you know and the things you find out, they'll just keep going along the way they've always been. And it isn't until you shine a light on it and they're kind of backed against a wall and have to answer for the things that we find, that's when real change happens. So
Here's something that's very simple but was important.
yeah. Oh, we've lost your audio. Oh no. Eugene, we've lost your audio. I didn't hear that last point. Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
I'm able to hear you here.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
We missed your last point.
Oh, yeah, so on the school bus background checks, we found a whole boatload of school districts weren't doing the background checks on the school bus drivers. We had people that were even driving school buses that didn't even have driver's licenses.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, now to me, it takes a lot of gumption.
Yeah.
Show up for a job interview to drive a school bus. You don't even have a driver's license. Like that to me is, I guess, points for courage, I guess. But obviously the audits showed, but to the school district's credit, we found a whole new system was put in place to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you doing now in terms of the coronavirus crisis that we're doing? How is your office stepping up to help Pennsylvania with that?
So we're continuing to do our job, like I said earlier, with the obvious understanding that we're all human beings. We got to manage this thing.
Sure.
But the number one thing, that the bread and butter of our department is school district audits. So a lot of school districts have been reaching out to us about how do they manage themselves during this crisis. So we're walking them through a lot of those type of issues. You know, how do they do contracting? How do they, you know, try to work through some of the online, some of those type of issues. So helping school districts through the pandemic has been a big responsibility of ours. We're also working with the administration when it comes to medical equipment, trying to make sure that we don't have healthcare facilities competing with each other to drive up the cost of medical devices. So we're working on those type of issues. Working with our veterans homes, we audit the veterans homes, making sure that they have all the appropriate procedures in place to make sure the vets that are in those homes are protected. And whether it be nursing homes, personal care homes, or the veterans homes, making sure that our previous work on banning mandatory overtime, again, mandatory overtime, you're allowed to work overtime, but it can't be mandatory. And also a lot of the workplace protections that are either in law or under the executive order.
Oh, we've lost your audio. Are you there? Can you hear me, Eugene?
Yeah, I just heard you there. Yeah.
There you go. You're back. Okay. Sorry.
Where'd you lose me at?
You were talking about the school districts and coming out of that, and I think you were moving on to your next point.
Yeah. So the other things we're doing is we're working with veterans homes, the state veterans homes. So we audit them to make sure that they're not having workers working mandatory overtime, making sure that the safety protocols that are in place, are nursing homes, personal care homes, again, a lot of the workplace safety rules, a lot of the safety that applies to the people, the residents of those facilities, we're making sure those are being followed as well. Also with healthcare facilities, making sure whether it be masks or ventilators, that they're not competing against each other to drive up the cost, particularly when it comes to Medicaid dollars, which is where my jurisdiction is.
Yeah, that's a big one, definitely. Hopefully we're flattening out this curve. And, our health system isn't going to be overloaded like other states, but you just never know.
Right.
And we want
It
to make
appears to
sure.
be, yeah, it appears to be, again, horrible, tough, but it seems to be like in central Pennsylvania, where at least it's been in my phone calls to Hershey, York Hospital, et cetera, that it's, they don't, they know it's tough, but they seem to be able to manage it. In fact, some of the nurses I've talked to and doctors feel that, the procedures they've put in place, about 2 weeks ago are now starting to bear fruit, that they're able to manage this. But clearly when you just see, from 40,000 feet, what's
Yeah.
happening in Philadelphia, and certainly some of the other big metro areas, you're even starting to see, New Orleans and some of these other areas.
Mhm.
We're clearly a long way from being out of the woods on
Absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that you are pushing for some changes just during this crisis, like for the liquid fuels money, the Act 13 funding, and for the first responders. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what you're asking the legislature to do for those people? Oh, we've lost your audio.
this. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think the weather is impacting this to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, one of the things that we audit gas tax money at what we call it liquid fuels, but when you're pumping gas, we audit the gas tax money. We also audit the environmental impact fees at the local communities, and we believe that there is a pot of money available if the legislature would make some minor tweaks to the law that would allow local governments to use this to help them deal with the pandemic. There's a lot of healthcare costs and local government costs that have popped up out of nowhere that weren't anticipated in local budgets. We believe some of these changes could help local governments. And again, that's money that's available. And I also believe it should only happen during this emergency declaration. But I believe it's a pretty quick change. It would open up some of these funding sources to help local governments deal with the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's what I like about you, specifically in your office, is that you think outside the box. And that's really what you need in a time like this, is to be able to say, okay, maybe this isn't how we've always done it, but this is a good option for right now, in an emergency. And I appreciate that.
When this started, when I say sat down with the team, we did it, of course, virtually.
Yeah,
But it was sort of like, how do we continue to do our job? And what are the things like, there's new items that are going to pop up. Like there's things that because we've never thought of that we're now going to have to take a look at or at
yeah,
least be helpful with. And some of this is literally just letting entities know, hey, I'm paying attention to how you're spending this money during
yeah.
this pandemic. Don't steal a dime of it, because when this is over, I'm going to want to see all the receipts to make sure this money was spent right. I don't want one single person to try to use this as an ability to pad their pocket.
Absolutely. It's got to go where it's intended to go. And
Absolutely.
like those three programs, it'd be nice if we could tweak them a little bit so that they have a new purpose and really make an impact. Because our government, state, local, they're hurting right now because, taxes have been pushed through to July. The sales tax revenue that they normally see is way down, obviously, because people are staying home, rightly so. So yeah, you've got to get creative with this money and make it work.
The price of gas, and again, I mean, there's a side of this is good, other than none of us are driving anywhere unless you're going to the grocery stores. When like I literally went to the grocery store this weekend, the moment it sort of pops out, like the price of gas in the last 3 weeks has dropped around 70 cents a gallon.
Yeah,
I mean, because why? At some level, if it was at $3 a gallon, no one would be buying it.
yeah,
So it's locally, it's about 208 a gallon here, which again is historically was pretty low relatively to where we are. But there's a reason for that. People are driving,
that's
um,
right.
and so that impacts local governments. People are not, they're not going into downtowns. They're not shopping. They're not going into restaurants. So, and even my daughter who does some of this waiting type of work. I mean, kids fall off. I
Yeah,
mean, so yeah, for my daughter who's in high school, that's not as big of a deal for her. But there's some people that like that's their second job in a way to help pay the rent, pay the mortgage. Well, they're no longer getting that tip revenue.
that's right. Yep, absolutely. I saw a post on Facebook. I don't remember who did it, but it said, "Is anybody else getting 3 weeks to the gallon right now with their car?"
Yeah, I know it's pretty amazing.
It
We've
really.
all had better cooking over the last couple of weeks, I think.
Yes, yes. I was hoping I could come out the other side of the pandemic like 40 pounds lighter, but I've started cooking and that's just not going to happen, sadly. Although I did see your handstand t-shirt. That was impressive.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I will spare everyone my workout routine during the pandemic.
Well, is there, before we get to questions, I don't know if we have any. I know you're on a tight schedule, so I do appreciate you coming and joining me and just kind of helping everybody understand where we're at. Do you have anything else that you're working on or anything else that you'd like people to know specifically?
Well, one thing I just put out to anyone that's on here is that if there's something that is happening, it's particularly when it comes to state taxpayer dollars, but anything that pops up, they think something isn't working the way it should. There's even something that maybe it's something I can't deal with, fix specifically myself, but we can get them to the right person. Please contact us. The website is paauditor.gov. Let us know what the problem is, and then we can, and my team and myself will do everything we can to try to fix it.
Okay, awesome. And like, are there any glaring issues that you see that this pandemic has really shined a light on, that maybe after this is over, we should be looking into?
Well, the unemployment system clearly is going to need to be
Yeah,
reformed and fixed. That is, I'm just sort of the process of how that works.
right.
It's clearly going to need to be addressed. I think we're also going, and this is both at a federal and a state level, the administration of loans to try to keep small businesses afloat. I mean, there's gonna have to be a lot of reform to that, because it's very clear that the money is being pushed out by the feds and states, but a lot of these businesses still can't access it. The
Yeah,
bigger companies can, because they have a lot more capacity. Sometimes they'll have their own lawyers on staff, et cetera. But if
yeah,
you're your traditional small business, they don't have that ability.
yeah,
Third is, I think, again, this isn't just a Pennsylvania issue, but I think we as a state have to think about this. That is the cost of prescription drugs, and the manufacturing of it, and including a lot of these medical devices. We've got to find a way. I want Pennsylvania to take the lead on this, but we have to find a way to make more of that stuff in the United States and not rely on other countries to get that done. So those are some of the things that really have highlighted, again, the faults in the unemployment system, and again, even on some of the workplace safety measures that have been placed during the emergency order. There is a lot of confusion as to who is the primary entity that's supposed to be enforcing that.
yeah.
The physical distancing rules. If you take someone that's
Oh, we've lost your audio again. Are you there? Nope.
can you hear me now?
Yep, got ya.
So one of the things that's also so the workplace safety stuff that's come through, that is, who is the primary entity that's enforcing a lot of these workplace safety rules? You have these social and physical distancing rules, in warehouses, or whether it be FedEx, UPS, Amazon. A lot of these workers, we're hearing concerns about, that they're not having these same rules put in place. Who's the one supposed to be enforcing that? Again, a lot of those questions have come up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do see, if anybody is on the Zoom call, there's a chat feature down at the bottom. You can ask your questions there. Or if you want to raise your hand, then I can unmute you and you can feel free to ask it directly. So we do have a question in the chat from Steve. He's asking, has your office considered process automation technology to do more with less? Many states are deploying it.
So the short answer is we've already, in the 1990s, when Barbara Hafer was Auditor General, there were 906 employees. We're now down to about 370 and doing the same number of audits. So we have dramatically improved our technology, from whether it be scanning devices, working from home, an entirely electronic department. Like I said, I got rid of 244 cars. We basically now just have a van in the department now. So we've done a lot of that already. Obviously, you're always trying to continue to improve yourself, but we still do need human beings to do the audits. And so we're trying to balance both of those. But we are, when Jack Wagner was Auditor General in 2008, the department's budget was $52 million. We're now down to $36 million in our annual budget while still finding all this waste and still doing the same number of audits. So we've made better.
Yeah, and that's a shame. When they look at where to cut money from the Auditor General's office, whose job is to literally find waste of taxpayer money, makes absolutely no sense.
I will only say that it is a fascinating timing that about the same exact time I announced I was running for Congress, the Republicans in the legislature cut my budget by $4 million. I'm sure it was purely coincidental.
I'm sure it was.
By the way, I want to say this, that this is actually an alarming trend, and not just for me. Nationwide, there has been a dramatic effort by legislatures to cut the watchdog budgets.
Yep.
I mean, there's the North Dakota auditor. He's a Republican, know him, good guy, Republican legislature there. They cut his budget too. Why? Because when he got in as auditor, he called him as he saw him. This has been, I've had, actually, Governing Magazine said my department's had more cuts than any auditor in the country over the last 10 years. But this has been a nationwide effort because, to be blunt.
Oh, we've lost your audio. Can you hear us? Are you there?
I hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I know, just being a watchdog myself, certainly not on your level, but, it's always a tightrope to walk when you're exposing powerful people for the dirty deeds that they're doing. And there's usually a lot of retribution down your path when you do that. And it's really not a difficult job. Or I'm sorry, it's not an easy job. It's very difficult because you get a lot of threats, you get a lot of pushback, you get a lot of people trying to discredit you, obviously in public. And for me, I definitely appreciate how hard of a job that is. Thank you for always standing tall and firm and never backing down, because that's what we need in a position like the Auditor General, for sure. Somebody who's going to fight for us no matter what.
Absolutely. I've loved every second of it. I work for the nearly 13 million Pennsylvanians, not for the insiders.
Yep. Amen to that. So we have another question. State and federal treasuries will be depleted more than they have been in many years. Unfortunately, there are those who would be delighted to use this as an opportunity to throw Pennsylvania off their health care insurance / funding for education. Can you suggest some concrete ways citizens who are sheltering at home can prevent this crisis?
What was the last part of that question? I'm sorry.
Can you suggest some concrete ways citizens who are sheltering at home can prevent this crisis from becoming a boon to such politicians?
But people should look, one of the things is, look, none of us are happy about this. You can still communicate with your legislator, whether it be email, phone call, instead of make it clear that you don't want them to use the pandemic and the depleted state revenues that are clearly going to show as an excuse for them to make disastrous cuts that will only hurt average Pennsylvanians, particularly when it comes to the Medicaid expansion that Governor Wolf put in. We've got to keep that, because that is a lifeblood for so many people.
Yeah, and especially at a time when the legislature is kind of off the grid, right? They're voting from home. I know I tried to watch a live feed and it just kept freezing every time they went to talk, which was weird. And you've got to stay on top of them, especially now. And the best way to do that is to call their office, like you said, make sure they know we are still here, we're still watching, and you still have to represent us.
I think that there should be, again, a demand that, I'm doing it here. You take questions. I'm an elected official. Like I work for you. I think state reps should be doing some of this as well. You know, members of Congress are having town halls. Again, it's not perfect. It's better to do it in person, but this is what we have to do right now.
Yeah.
I think state reps should be and state senators should be doing the same thing.
I agree, absolutely. So we have another question. With the coronavirus hitting the Black community as hard as it is, what do you think you could do to support the community here in Pennsylvania?
I think there's two parts of that. One is just sort of right now, which is making sure people get the care they need, making sure that people that are particularly the most vulnerable, the Black community, clearly this is happening when you just see the numbers, the spike in the Black community. Clearly there is an issue where people are working in vulnerable situations. We got to make sure that health departments in the state are enforcing the physical distancing and not taking it out on the employees. So that's in the short term, we've got to do that while making sure that our volunteer networks are getting food out there. We have so many hungry kids that go to school. 10% of York City kids, for example, when I was a state rep, I'm sure the number is relatively the same now, are functionally homeless. We have to make sure that they're still getting their meals, still getting food. When a kid is in school, they get at least some food during the day because they're at the school cafeteria, breakfast or lunch. With them now being at home, that is now a much bigger challenge. So we've got to make sure that those food services are still available. After this is done, clearly we're going to have to address how it impacted the Black community and the inner city communities more. Part of that is clearly some of the work sites weren't as safe as they should have been. But we also need to, I think, look at our community development block grant funding and how we can improve housing stock, make housing more affordable. When we have some of the larger housing units in cities, and sometimes they're outside cities, making sure they are safer environments as well. So I think those are some of the things that can be done both in the short term and the long term to try to help address these issues. And there's going to be other issues that come up as well, but making sure everyone has access to health care, making sure everyone's workplace is safe, and making sure people have access to affordable housing that is both clean and safe. I think those items could go a long way. But in the immediate right now, the thing that scares me the most is kids not being in school that are low income, that are on assisted food programs. We need to make sure that they're still able to get the food they need.
Yeah, and again, this, like I said before, this shines a glaring light on what problems we have. And now that everybody's sheltering in place and schools are closed for the year, now we see, okay, well, how are these children in areas with no internet service supposed to get a long distance education?
And let me also throw it, and I talked about York and the homelessness. Harrisburg School District, when I audited the Harrisburg School District, in the Harrisburg High School, every single kid is on either free or assisted school food program. Every kid, which means right now I know the schools are doing the best they can, and I've been doing some volunteer effort, and we've had guys like Blake Lynch and some others doing some tremendous volunteer work. I know the school boards and the administrators and the teachers are doing the best they can.
Yes.
But think about that. Every single kid in that high school needed help with food every single day, and they're now not in that school.
Yeah.
So that just concerns me just from the nutrition side of it. We've got to double. So if people have the ability to do some volunteer work, helping get food to some of these kids and some of these needy families, but that's something that we all can do something there. Yeah. And if you can't actually help because you're vulnerable, because you've got some respiratory issue, you can still donate some food. We can all do something on that.
Absolutely. There's some.
And but the other point you brought up is on the internet issue. Yeah, like a lot of us are blessed that have access to internet. But right now, I know with West York School District, where my daughter goes, not every sometimes we just assume everyone has a laptop and everyone has Wi-Fi. Well, school had to provide Chromebooks to a pretty big chunk of students because not every kid had a computer at home, which meant they wouldn't be able to complete their academics.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that's going to be a logistical nightmare when things go back to normal for your office and trying to audit all of these emergency things that have taken place.
Yeah, another thing, no, absolutely. And another thing I want to chime in on from the previous question is I tasked my team to come up with different things that we can have public forums on over the next week or so, over the next 2 weeks while we're during the pandemic. So one of them will be like housing, small business, where we'll be talking to the people that are on the front line. And so it'll be a Q&A session so that we can inform the public. Okay, if you need a housing voucher to stay in your house, or rental assistance, or maybe with the PUC, someone's threatening to shut off your electricity when they're not allowed to, or you're a small business and you can't get access to that loan, we want to do our part to try to make sure that people are getting that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're running short on time. You've got to run here shortly. Brad, can you tell us, are there any questions on Facebook? I want to make sure we don't miss those people as well.
Nope, just a comment saying it's great to see the Auditor General without a suit and tie.
Oh,
There
well,
you
the handstand T-shirt challenge filled that one too. So.
It did.
Well, there was a video on Simone Biles doing that, and it's sort of like, okay, I need to have a little humble pie now, because Simone Biles didn't do it with her feet against the wall, and she did like a whole somersault while in a handstand, totally flipping her body around, to then getting into like an L sit with her handstand. I was like going, okay, I'm a little less braggadocious about the handstand push-up T-shirt challenge.
Well, I'm giving kudos to both of you because I'm not even remotely trying it.
Well, I appreciate that, but watching Simone Biles, I'm like going, okay, I can shut up now.
There's a reason she's won a few gold medals.
Well, yeah, she's pretty good at that sport, yes.
Yeah, she is for sure. Okay, well, like I said, I know you have to run. You have another interview coming up, and I can't thank you enough again for what you've done for PA. As our Auditor General, and for standing up for us and continuing to fight every day, and for joining me here, taking time out of your day and talking to us. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure, Patty. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for the platform, and everyone out there, stay safe, and let's all do our part so we can flatten the curve and hopefully get back to normal sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end it.
Here, have a good day.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye, everybody.